Have you ever been so desperate to escape someone that you would do anything? For Elara Vance, a 26-year-old illustrator living in the heart of New York City, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday. The man she was running from wasn't a monster from a horror film, but a far more terrifying demon, her ex, Marcus Thorne, a man who refused to let her go. In a blind panic, standing in a crowded coffee shop, she did the unthinkable. She lunged forward and threw her arms around a complete stranger, burying her face in his chest. But she had no idea that the stranger whose life she had just crashed into was Julian Sterling, and that one desperate, impulsive hug was about to ignite a firestorm of passion, danger, and intrigue that would change their lives forever. The bell above the door of the Daily Grind on Bleecker Street chimed a sound Elara Vance usually found comforting. Today it was a death knell. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of soft indie music and the hiss of the espresso machine. She had seen him through the rain-streaked window, Marcus Thorne, her ex. He was standing across the street, his signature smirk playing on his lips, that look of predatory ownership in his eyes that still haunted her dreams. It had been 6 months since she'd finally broken free. 6 months of him texting, calling, and accidentally showing up wherever she was. He was a master of psychological warfare, making her feel like she was the crazy one, the one overreacting. But the cold knot of fear in her stomach was real. He started crossing the street. Panic, sharp and icy, seized her. She couldn't run. He'd loved the chase. She couldn't confront him. His voice had a way of shrinking her down to nothing. Her eyes darted around the crowded cafe, searching for an escape, a shield. And then she saw him. A man standing near the counter, waiting for his order. He was tall, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored grey suit that probably cost more than her rent. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and he was staring intently at his phone, a picture of calm detachment in the bustling room. He was a fortress. Without a second thought, fueled by pure adrenaline, Elara moved. She closed the distance in 3 quick strides, and before her rational mind could scream in protest, she threw her arms around him from the side, pressing her face into the surprisingly soft fabric of his suit jacket. It smelled of bergamot and clean rain. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry I'm late," she exclaimed, her voice a pitch higher than usual, laced with a tremor she hoped sounded like breathless affection. The traffic was an absolute nightmare. The man went rigid. She could feel the solid wall of his chest tense up, his entire body freezing in surprise. For a horrifying second, she thought he would shove her off call security and expose her lie to Marcus, who had just walked through the door. She risked a glance over the stranger's shoulder. Marcus stood there, dripping, his smirk faltering as he took in the scene. He saw her wrapped in the arms of another man, a man who radiated a quiet authority Marcus could only ever imitate. Elara tightened her grip, burying her face again. "I missed you so much," she whispered into the stranger's chest, the words both a plea and a performance. A low, controlled voice rumbled against her ear. "It's all right. I'm here now." The response was so unexpected, so calm, that it took her breath away. He didn't push her away. He didn't question her. He played along. He even slightly angled his body, shielding her more completely from Marcus's view. She felt a large, warm hand rest gently on the small of her back, a gesture of quiet reassurance. She could feel Marcus's stare burning into them. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Finally, the bell chimed again. Elara held her breath, praying it was him leaving. When she dared to peek, Marcus was gone. The torrent of relief that washed over her was so powerful, her knees felt weak. Slowly, mortifyingly, she began to untangle herself from the stranger. She pulled back her face, flaming with a blush that she was sure reached the roots of her hair. Now she had to face him. His eyes, a startling shade of deep blue, were not angry but intensely curious. They scanned her face, taking in her wide, apologetic eyes and the lingering fear she couldn't quite mask. I'm so incredibly sorry," she stammered, her hands fluttering uselessly. "I can't explain. I can, but you'd think I was insane. That was... You have every right to be furious." He simply watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then a corner of his mouth ticked upward in a ghost of a smile. "Is your ex the one who looks like he belongs on a billboard for toxic cologne gone?" The bluntness of it shocked a laugh out of her. "Yes. Yes, he's gone. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done." "Julian," a barista called out, placing a single black coffee on the counter. The stranger, Julian, nodded to the barista before turning his attention back to her. "I take it this happens often enough," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm Elara. And I owe you a new suit or a coffee or a lifetime supply of something." "You saved me. Don't worry about the suit," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. He picked up his coffee. "But I might take you up on that coffee sometime, as repayment for my services as an emergency boyfriend." He gave her another small, genuine smile. It transformed his face, making him look less like an intimidating CEO and more like someone she might actually want to have coffee with. Before she could form a coherent response, he was turning to leave. "Wait!" she called out, a new wave of panic hitting her. Your coffee? Let me buy it." He paused at the door, turning back. "Consider it a down payment on the one you owe me. Have a better day, Elara." And then he was gone, disappearing into the grey New York drizzle, leaving Elara standing in the middle of the daily grind, her heart still racing, but for an entirely different reason. In her haste and confusion, she didn't notice that her small, leather-bound sketchbook had slipped from her tote bag and now lay forgotten on the floor, right where the mysterious Julian had been standing. The adrenaline from the encounter with Marcus, followed by the bewildering kindness of the stranger, Julian left Elara feeling shaky and disconnected for the rest of the day. Back in her small, art-filled apartment in the East Village, she tried to lose herself in a freelance illustration project, but her mind kept replaying the scene. The feel of his suit, the solid strength of his arm around her, the calm timbre of his voice. She was both mortified by her own audacity and deeply, profoundly grateful. It wasn't until that evening, as she was packing her bag for the next day, that she realized her sketchbook was missing. Panic, cold and familiar, washed over her again. That book was her life. It contained months of work character sketches, random thoughts, and the raw emotional drawings she'd made in the painful aftermath of her breakup with Marcus. Losing it felt like losing a part of her soul. She tore her apartment apart, her search growing more frantic with every empty drawer and cleared off shelf. Finally defeated, she sank onto her worn velvet couch, her head in her hands. She retraced her steps. The office, the subway, the coffee shop, the daily grind. It must have fallen out when she'd accosted that poor man. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. An unknown number. She normally ignored them, but on a desperate whim she answered. "Hello, is this Elara Vance?" a man's voice asked. It was deep and professional, not the voice she was half hoping to hear. "Yes, this is she. My name is Arthur Covington. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Julian Sterling. I believe you met him this morning. You seem to have left a sketchbook behind. He found it and asked me to contact you to arrange its return." Relief and confusion warred inside her. Julian, he'd found her book. But an executive assistant, Mr. Sterling. How did you get my number? Your name was on the inside cover, and a business card was tucked into the back pocket. Ms. Vance. Mr. Sterling is a very resourceful man. There was a hint of pride in the assistant's tone. He'd like to return it to you personally. He suggested coffee to settle the debt you mentioned. Elara's mind raced. An executive assistant, a resourceful man, the suit, the quiet confidence. Who was this guy? Yes, of course. That would be great. They arranged to meet the next afternoon at a quiet cafe in south of Houston Street, one much sleeker and more minimalist than her usual haunt. Elara spent the next 24 hours in a state of nervous anticipation. She told herself it was just about getting her sketchbook back, but a larger part of her knew it was more than that. She was intrigued by the man who had been her unwitting savior. She arrived 5 minutes early, her hands clammy. Julian was already there, seated at a small table in the corner, her sketchbook resting beside him. Today he was dressed in dark jeans and a simple, charcoal grey cashmere sweater. The casual attire did nothing to diminish the aura of power that clung to him. If anything, it made him seem more dangerously handsome. "Elara," he said, standing as she approached. His smile was warmer this time, reaching his sapphire blue eyes. "I'm glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said, her voice genuine as she looked at her sketchbook. "You have no idea how much this means to me." "Thank you. I think I have some idea," he said, gesturing to the book as they sat down. "I hope you don't mind." I glanced at the first few pages to identify the owner. "You're incredibly talented." A flush of pleasure and embarrassment warmed her cheeks. "It's just doodling, really." "I disagree," he said, his gaze direct and serious. "You capture emotion. That's a rare skill." Their coffees arrived, and the conversation flowed with an ease that stunned her. He didn't mention the bizarre circumstances of their first meeting again, for which she was grateful. Instead, he asked about her art, her life in the city, her dreams. He was an incredible listener, attentive and insightful, his questions showing he was actually hearing her answers, not just waiting for his turn to speak. She, in turn, learned small things about him. He enjoyed sailing. He had a passion for architectural history. He spoke of his work in vague but compelling terms, mentioning logistical challenges and global market strategies. He cleverly sidestepped any direct questions about what exactly he did. Elara, caught up in their rapport, didn't press. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen not as an accessory or a project, but as a person. As they were getting ready to leave, an hour had melted away into what felt like minutes. So she said, clutching her return sketchbook to her chest, "Now that my debt is paid, does this mean I won't see you again?" The question was bolder than she'd intended, but she couldn't help it. Julian's smile widened. "I was rather hoping we could move from a debtor-creditor relationship to something more conventional. Dinner Friday night." Her heart gave a joyful leap. "I'd love that." They parted ways on the sidewalk, a tangible current of promise hanging in the air between them. Elara walked home on a cloud, her mind filled not with fear of Marcus, but with the exhilarating possibility of Julian. That evening, curled up on her couch, she let her curiosity get the better of her. She'd only learned his full name from his assistant, Julian Sterling. On a whim, she typed it into a search engine, her breath caught in her throat. The screen was flooded with results. Photos of him at galas, ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, featured in articles from Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg. Headlines screamed at her, "Julian Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, revolutionizes global shipping. The elusive billionaire inside the Sterling empire. NYC's most powerful bachelor." Her world tilted on its axis. The kind, attentive man from the coffee shop was not just a successful businessman. He was a titan of industry, a billionaire. He lived in a world of private jets and penthouse apartments on Park Avenue, a universe away from her tiny East Village walk-up and freelance artist's salary. The warmth from their meeting turned to ice in her stomach. Why hadn't he told her? Was this a game to him? A slumming it experiment to see what it was like to date a normal person? Old insecurities, expertly planted by Marcus over the years, began to sprout like toxic weeds. "You're not good enough. You're out of your league." The man who had saved her from one complicated reality had just plunged her headfirst into another one that was infinitely more intimidating. And she had a date with him on Friday. The discovery of Julian Sterling's true identity sent Elara into a spiral of anxiety. The easy connection she had felt with him was now tainted by a paralyzing sense of inadequacy. What could she possibly have to offer a man who could have anything and anyone in the world? Every outfit in her closet suddenly looked cheap. Every story she could tell about her life seemed mundane. She almost cancelled the date 3 times. Each time she would type out the text message, her thumb hovering over the send button, only to be stopped by the memory of his eyes, the genuine interest and kindness she'd seen in them. He hadn't seemed like he was playing a game. She decided against her better judgment to go. She had to know if what she'd felt was real, or if she was just the latest curiosity for a bored billionaire. He had booked a table at a restaurant called Aria, a place so exclusive Elara had never even heard of it. It had no sign, just a discreet oak door on a quiet triangle below Canal Street. When she gave her name, the host led her not into a dining room, but to a private elevator. It opened directly into a breathtaking rooftop garden restaurant enclosed in glass, with a panoramic view of the glittering Manhattan skyline. Julian was waiting for her, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark blue suit worn without a tie. He stood and kissed her cheek, a simple gesture that sent a jolt of electricity through her. "You look beautiful, Elara," he said, his voice a low murmur that cut through her nervousness. "This place is..." She started at a loss for words as she took in the view. "Unreal. I wanted somewhere we could talk without being interrupted," he explained, guiding her to the table. The meal was a blur of exquisite food and wine, but Elara barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind. She felt like an imposter, a little girl playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong to. She was quiet, her earlier easy banter replaced by stilted one-word answers. Julian noticed the change immediately. Halfway through their main course, he put down his fork and looked at her, his expression serious. "Elara, what's wrong? You've barely said a word all night. If this is about what happened with your ex, if he's bothered you again..." "No, it's not him," she said quickly, shaking her head. "It's you." His eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Me. What did I do?" She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I Googled you, Julian." Understanding dawned on his face, followed by an expression she couldn't quite read. It looked like resignation. He sighed, leaning back in his chair and running a hand through his hair. "I was afraid of this," he said quietly. "Afraid? Why wouldn't you tell me?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her voice. "Did you think it was funny? Watching me talk about my struggles to pay rent while you're probably deciding which of your summer homes to visit?" "No, Elara, never," he said, his voice firm, leaning forward again. "That's not it at all. Look, the name's Sterling. It changes things. The moment people know, they change. They either want something from me, or they make assumptions about me. Women I've dated, they either see me as a walking bank account, or they're so intimidated they can't be themselves. With you in that coffee shop, I was just a guy. And when we talked yesterday, it was real. I haven't had that in a very long time. I wanted to hold on to it just for a little while longer. His confession chipped away at her defensiveness. She saw not arrogance in his eyes, but a profound loneliness. The gilded cage. He was trapped in it, just as she had been trapped by Marcus, albeit in a very different way. "So the man who likes sailing and architectural history is real?" she asked softly. "He's the only part that is real," Julian replied, his voice laced with sincerity. "The rest, the CEO, the billionaire, that's a job, a responsibility. It's not who I am." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His touch was warm and steady. "I know this is a lot to take in, but please don't let my last name scare you away. The connection I feel with you has nothing to do with Sterling Industries and everything to do with Elara Vance." Her heart ached for him, for the isolation his fortune had built around him. All her anxiety, her feelings of inadequacy, began to melt away, replaced by a wave of empathy. He wasn't a god on a pedestal. He was just a man searching for something real. "Okay, Julian," she whispered, her fingers curling around his. "Okay." The rest of the dinner was different. The tension was gone, replaced by a new, more fragile intimacy. She asked him about the pressures of his life, and he answered honestly. He told her about the weight of his family's legacy and the constant scrutiny of the public eye. She in turn told him more about Marcus, about the slow, insidious way he had chipped away at her self-esteem, making her feel small and dependent. Julian listened, his expression hardening with anger on her behalf. "No one should ever make you feel that way," he said fiercely. "You're one of the strongest, most vibrant people I've ever met." When he took her home, he walked her to the door of her humble building. The contrast between his chauffeured Mercedes parked at the curb and her peeling front door was stark, but for the first time it didn't bother her. "I had a wonderful evening," she said, turning to face him. "So did I," he said, his eyes searching hers in the dim light of the entryway. "More than you know." He leaned in, slowly, giving her ample time to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers softly at first, then with a deepening passion that spoke of pent-up longing. It wasn't a kiss of power or possession, but one of tenderness and relief. It was a kiss that promised a beginning. But as Elara lay in bed that night, the ghost of his kiss still on her lips, a cold thought crept in. A man like Julian Sterling didn't just have a public profile. He had a family, a powerful old money family, who would undoubtedly have expectations for the kind of woman he should be with, and she was certain she wasn't it. Their story wasn't just about them anymore. She had a feeling the real storm was yet to come. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Elara felt like she was living in a dream. Julian was attentive, romantic, and surprisingly down to earth. He seemed to delight in her world as much as she was dazzled by his. They had pizza at her favorite hole-in-the-wall spot in Brooklyn, and he introduced her to the rarefied world of charity galas at the Met. He'd show up at her door after a long day of board meetings just to watch a movie on her lumpy couch, claiming it was more comfortable than his custom-designed home theater. He was slowly, methodically helping her rebuild the confidence Marcus had shattered. He praised her artwork, even commissioning a piece for his office, a large, abstract canvas that she poured all her newfound hope into. For the first time, Elara felt her future opening up, bright and full of possibilities. But shadows have a way of creeping in at the edges of even the brightest light. The first shadow was Marcus. After his initial retreat, he had been silent, a silence that Elara found more unnerving than his usual harassment. Then the strange occurrences began. A freelance gig she was counting on was suddenly cancelled, the client giving a vague, nonsensical reason. Her application for a prestigious art grant was rejected, though she'd been told she was a frontrunner. She couldn't prove it, but she felt Marcus's fingerprints all over it. He was pulling strings using the connections his wealthy family afforded him to sabotage her career from the shadows. It was his way of reminding her that he still had power over her life. When she told Julian, his face grew dark. "This stops now," he said, his voice cold with a fury she'd never seen before. He immediately put his own security team on it, asking them to discreetly investigate Marcus Thorne's activities. He wanted to protect her, to build a wall around her that Marcus couldn't penetrate. But Elara felt a chill of fear. She didn't want a war fought on her behalf. She just wanted to be free. The second, more formidable shadow was the Sterling family, specifically Julian's older sister, Serafina Sterling. Serafina was the acting COO of Sterling Industries, a sharp, intimidating woman with a reputation for being even more ruthless in business than her father had been. She was the gatekeeper of the family's legacy and its fiercest protector. Julian had warned Elara about her, describing her as cautious and overprotective, which Elara rightly translated as suspicious and judgmental. Their first meeting was engineered by Serafina herself, an invitation to a Sunday brunch at the Sterling family estate in the Hamptons. The sprawling Gatsby-esque mansion was designed to intimidate, and it succeeded. As Elara stood in the grand foyer, feeling woefully underdressed in her simple sundress, Serafina descended the sweeping staircase. She was the mirror image of Julian, tall, dark-haired, with the same piercing blue eyes, but hers held an icy reserve. "So you're the artist," Serafina said, her voice dripping with condescension as she looked Elara up and down. It wasn't a greeting, it was an assessment. "Julian has told me so much about you." The implication was clear, none of it good. The brunch was a masterclass in psychological interrogation. Serafina's questions were cloaked in politeness, but designed to sting. "Elara, what an interesting name. Is your family from New York?" she asked, knowing full well Julian had told her Elara grew up in a working-class family in Ohio. "And your art, it must be so fulfilling. I imagine it's a rather difficult way to make a stable living." Every word was a subtle jab, a reminder of the chasm between their worlds. Elara parried as best she could, her answers polite but firm. Julian was a constant supportive presence by her side, squeezing her hand under the table, steering the conversation to safer topics, but he couldn't completely shield her from his sister's venom. The final blow came as they were leaving. Serafina pulled Elara aside under the guise of admiring the garden. "I want you to know that I've had a background check done on you," Serafina said coolly, not a trace of apology in her voice. "I know all about Marcus Thorne. I know about your student debt. I know about your family's financial situation. My brother has a good heart which makes him vulnerable. He sees a damsel in distress and wants to be the hero." She paused, her eyes locking onto Elara's. "I've seen women like you before. They see the Sterling name as a ticket out of their dreary lives. But I will not let you damage this family or my brother. Whatever game you're playing, I advise you to end it. You are out of your depth." The accusation hit Elara like a physical blow. A gold digger. That's all Serafina saw. The carefully constructed confidence she had been building over the past weeks crumbled into dust. The old familiar voice of inadequacy screamed in her head. The drive back to the city was silent and tense. Julian could feel her retreat see the walls going up around her. "Don't listen to her, Elara," he said, his voice tight with anger at his sister. "She doesn't know you." "But she's right, isn't she?" Elara whispered, staring out the window, unable to look at him. "Look at me, Julian. Look at my life. And then look at yours. We don't make sense. Maybe I'm just a project for you." "A damsel in distress. Don't say that," he said, his voice pained. "That is the last thing you are to me." But the seed of doubt had been planted, watered by Serafina's scorn, and fertilized by Marcus's insidious sabotage. Elara was trapped. Behind her, the ghost of Marcus was trying to drag her back into a past defined by control and fear. Ahead of her, the world of the Sterlings loomed a cold, judgmental fortress she wasn't sure she had the strength to conquer. And in the middle was Julian, the man she was falling in love with, whose love might be the very thing that destroyed her. The aftermath of the disastrous brunch in the Hamptons was a cold front that settled over Elara and Julian's relationship. Serafina's words had burrowed deep under Elara's skin, echoing the worst of her insecurities. She found herself pulling away from Julian, questioning his every gesture. Was his generosity a form of control? Was his affection merely pity? The effortless joy they had found in each other was replaced by a strained caution. Julian, for his part, was caught in an impossible position. He was furious with Serafina, leading to a series of heated phone calls that only served to harden his sister's resolve. She saw his passionate defense of Elara not as proof of his love, but as evidence of how thoroughly he was being manipulated. The pressure from both sides began to feel suffocating. One evening, Marcus took his harassment to a new level. Elara was leaving her part-time teaching job at a community arts centre when he cornered her in the dimly lit alleyway behind the building. "We need to talk, Ellie," he said, using the pet name she now despised. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. His cologne, the one Julian had so accurately described, was overpowering. "There's nothing to talk about, Marcus." "Leave me alone," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, her keys clutched in her fist like a weapon. "I see you're playing in the big leagues now." "Julian Sterling," he sneered, his charm replaced by a raw, ugly jealousy. "Did you tell him about us, about our plans, or do you just cry on his shoulder and pretend to be a victim? I made you Ellie. People knew who you were because you were with me, and I can unmake you just as easily." His threat hung in the air, thick and menacing. Suddenly, the headlights of a black sedan flooded the alley. A door opened, and one of Julian's security guards, a large, stoic man named David, stepped out. He didn't say a word, simply stood there, an immovable object. Marcus's bravado evaporated. He shot Elara a look of pure hatred before turning and disappearing into the night. Shaking Elara allowed David to escort her to the car. Julian had put a tail on her. The realization was a conflicting mix of gratitude and violation. He was protecting her, but he had done it without her knowledge. She felt less like a partner and more like a fragile asset to be guarded. She confronted him the moment she walked into his sterile, immaculate penthouse apartment. You had me follow Julian, who had been pacing with worry, stopped. To keep you safe. After what you told me about Marcus, I couldn't take any chances, so you made a decision about my life, my safety without even talking to me. She shot back, her voice rising. That's what he used to do. Julian Marcus. He'd decide what was best for me, what I could and couldn't handle. I didn't leave him just to fall into another cage, no matter how gilded it is. That's not fair, Elara, Julian said, his voice strained. I'm nothing like him. I'm trying to protect you from him. Or are you trying to protect your investment? She snapped the ugly words tumbling out before she could stop them. Seraphina's poison was finally working its way through her system. Julian recoiled as if she'd slapped him. The hurt in his eyes was so profound it momentarily silenced her. Is that what you think this is? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. That you're some acquisition? I don't know what to think anymore, she cried, tears of frustration streaming down her face. Your sister thinks I'm a gold digger. My ex is trying to ruin my life. I'm surrounded by security guards and lawyers and money. I don't know where I fit in all of this. I don't even feel like myself anymore. The fight was brutal and raw, fueled by weeks of unspoken fears and external pressures. All their differences were laid bare on the cold marble floor of his apartment. He represented a world of power and control that she instinctively distrusted, and she represented a world of vulnerability and emotional chaos that he didn't know how to navigate without using the tools of his empire, money, and force. Maybe your sister was right, Elara finally said, her voice hollow and defeated. Maybe I am out of my depth. Maybe this was a mistake. The word mistake hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Julian didn't argue. The fight had drained him too. He just looked at her, his face a mask of pain and exhaustion. If that's what you believe, he said, his voice flat, then maybe you're right. It wasn't what she believed, not really. But in that moment, overwhelmed and heartbroken, running away felt like the only option. She turned and walked out of the penthouse, out of the elevator, and out of his life, leaving Julian standing alone in the deafening silence of his perfect empty home. The test of trust had come, and they had both failed. Leaving Julian felt like tearing out a part of her own soul, but in the days that followed, Elara tried to convince herself it was for the best. She craved the simplicity of her old life, even with its struggles. She changed her phone number to cut off any remaining ties to Marcus, and threw herself into her art with a desperate, feverish intensity. Her canvases became a battlefield of dark, swirling colours and fractured lines, a reflection of the turmoil inside her. Julian, meanwhile, was adrift. The silence from Elara was a constant, aching void. His work suffered. He was short-tempered in meetings, distracted and distant. Seraphina saw his misery and for a fleeting moment felt a pang of guilt, but quickly suppressed it. She had done what was necessary to protect their family. In her mind, the temporary pain Julian felt was preferable to the long-term disaster Elara Vance would have surely brought upon them. It was Marcus Thorne who refused to let the story end. He had been watching from the sidelines, his spies in the city's gossip columns feeding him information. He knew about the breakup. It wasn't enough for him to have Elara back. He needed to utterly destroy the man who had taken her. He needed to punish Elara for daring to believe she could have a life better than the one he had offered. He decided to burn their worlds to the ground. He reached out to a notoriously sleazy journalist named Fletcher Reed, who worked for a tabloid called the New York Chronicle. For the right price, Reed could turn whispers into headlines. Marcus fed him a carefully crafted story, a grotesque tapestry woven from half-truths and outright lies. The story broke on a Thursday morning. The headline was explosive: Billionaire's bait, how aspiring artist Elara Vance cons her way into the Sterling fortune. The article painted Elara as a cunning, manipulative social climber. It detailed her modest background and history of dating wealthy men, with Marcus positioned as a heartbroken victim she had callously discarded for a bigger prize. It included quotes fabricated by Marcus, where she supposedly bragged to friends about landing the ultimate whale. It even twisted her past relationship with him, suggesting she had left him because his family's fortune, while significant, wasn't in the same league as the Sterlings. But the most venomous part was the attack on her art. The article claimed that Julian's commission for his office was not a genuine purchase, but a payoff, a way to buy her silence and cooperation. It implied her entire brief rise in the art world was orchestrated and funded by Julian stripping her of the one thing that was truly her own, her talent. The story was a sensation. It was picked up by mainstream news outlets not as fact, but as a scandalous human interest piece. The private life of the elusive Julian Sterling. Elara's face was suddenly everywhere. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment building. Her photo, a candid shot of her looking stressed and tired, was juxtaposed with glamorous red carpet photos of Julian. The narrative was set the predator and the prey. The shame was a physical weight. Her friends called offering support, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Her world had shrunk to the four walls of her apartment. Marcus had succeeded. He had unmade her. At Sterling Industries headquarters, the fallout was immediate. The board of directors was in an uproar. Their conservative blue-chip company was now embroiled in a sordid tabloid scandal. The company's stock took a small but noticeable dip. The story wasn't just about Julian's personal life anymore. It was affecting the brand. Serafina stormed into Julian's office, a copy of the Chronicle clutched in her hand. I told you, Julian, I warned you this would happen. This is what she brings into our lives. Chaos, scandal. But Julian wasn't looking at the stock tickers or listening to his sister. He was staring at the newspaper, at the cruel, twisted words used to describe the woman he loved. He saw past the lies and saw the hand of one person, Marcus Thorne, and he saw something else, his own failure. He had let his pride and hurt get in the way. He had let Elara walk away when he should have fought for her, fought with her. He remembered her words in his apartment. I didn't leave him just to fall into another cage. He finally understood. He had tried to protect her, using his power, the very thing that made her feel trapped. He hadn't trusted her strength. A cold, clear resolve settled over him. This wasn't just an attack on Elara. It was an attack on him, on his judgment, and on the one real thing he had found in a lifetime of artifice. Get Arthur on the line, Julian said to Serafina, his voice dangerously calm. Cancel my afternoon and schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning at the Sterling Tower. It's time I set the record straight. Serafina stared at him aghast. A press conference? Are you insane? You never speak to the press. You'll only add fuel to the fire. The fire is already burning, Julian said, his blue eyes like chips of ice. Marcus Thorne started it, but I'm going to be the one to finish it. He wasn't just going to deny the story. He was going to war, and he only hoped it wasn't too late to get the one person he needed on his side. While Julian planned his counterattack, Elara was hitting rock bottom. Huddled in her apartment, the city's sirens a constant soundtrack to her misery, she felt completely isolated. Every buzz of her phone made her jump. The hateful comments online, the photographers outside it, was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She had done what Marcus and Serafina had both wanted she had run, and yet the fallout had followed her more destructive than she could ever have imagined. That evening there was a knock on her door. Not the loud, insistent banging of a reporter, but a soft, hesitant rap. She ignored it. It came again, more persistent this time. Elara, it's Julian. Please just give me 5 minutes. Her heart stopped. Hearing his voice through the wood of the door was both a comfort and a torment. Every instinct told her to stay hidden to nurse her wounds in private. But a flicker of the fight she thought she had lost sparked within her. She slowly unlatched the locks and opened the door a crack. He looked terrible. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. He wasn't the powerful CEO. He was the man she'd had coffee with, vulnerable and real. What do you want, Julian? She asked, her voice raspy. I came to apologize, he said, his sincerity palpable. I failed you, Elara. I tried to handle everything with money and security because that's all I know. I didn't trust you. I didn't trust us. I let my sister and your ex get into my head and I let you walk away. It was the biggest mistake of my life. He held up a hand as she started to speak. I'm not here to ask you to take me back. I'm here because I'm going to destroy the man who did this to you, and I'm going to clear your name. But I won't do it for you. I want to do it with you, if you'll let me. He explained his plan for the press conference. He wasn't just going to issue a denial. His legal team had been working around the clock. They had uncovered a pattern of behavior from Marcus, 2 other women who had been harassed and intimidated after breaking up with him, both of whom were too scared to speak up. They also had financial records showing a large, untraceable payment made to the journalist Fletcher Reed. But they'll twist it, Elara said, her voice filled with doubt. They'll say you bought those women's stories, that you fabricated the evidence. They will, Julian agreed, unless the truth comes from you. They've painted you as a victim and a villain. But you're neither. You're a survivor. And you are the strongest person I know. I need you to stand beside me tomorrow and show them who Elara Vance really is. It was the ultimate choice. She could stay hidden and let this storm eventually pass, leaving her reputation in tatters. Or she could step into the heart of the hurricane stand beside the man she loved and fight for her own truth, exposing herself to the world in the process. Looking at Julian at the unwavering belief in his eyes, she found her answer. For months she had been running, first from Marcus, then from the overwhelming reality of Julian's world. She was done running. Okay, she said, a new strength hardening her voice. Okay, I'll do it. The next morning, the press room at Sterling Tower was a media circus. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. When Julian walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the room. But the real gasp came when Elara walked out behind him, taking her place at the podium by his side. She looked pale but resolute, her hands clasped in front of her. Julian began, his voice calm and commanding. He laid out the facts, presenting the evidence of Marcus's harassment and the payment to the journalist. He didn't raise his voice, he simply stated the truth. These are the actions of a vindictive and cowardly man, Julian concluded. But the lies he told are not the most important part of this story. The most important part is the woman he tried to silence. He turned the podium over to Elara. She stepped forward, her heart pounding. She looked out at the sea of faces and cameras, and for a second she faltered. Then she felt Julian's hand on the small of her back, a quiet, steadying presence, the same way he had stood with her in the coffee shop, what felt like a lifetime ago. My name is Elara Vance, she began, her voice shaking slightly at first, then growing stronger with every word. For the last year I have been systematically harassed, intimidated, and manipulated by my ex-boyfriend Marcus Thorne. I'm not a gold digger, I'm a painter. My work is my own. And I will not allow a bitter, entitled man to take that away from me. She didn't just talk about Marcus, she spoke to anyone who had ever been made to feel small, to anyone who had been a victim of psychological abuse. Her story became universal. By the time she finished, the room was silent, the cynical reporters looking at her with a newfound respect. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The story shifted entirely. Marcus Thorne became the villain, his family's name dragged through the mud. Fletcher Reed was fired, and the New York Chronicle issued a full-page retraction and apology. The two other women, emboldened by Elara's courage, came forward with their own stories, and a restraining order was issued against Marcus, followed by a lawsuit that would cripple him both socially and financially. In the quiet of Julian's office, after the press conference, Seraphina Sterling appeared in the doorway. She looked at Elara, her expression unreadable. I was wrong about you, Miss Vance, she said, her voice stiff but sincere. You have a fortitude I did not expect. You are good for my brother. It was the closest Seraphina would ever come to an apology, but it was enough. Elara and Julian stood by the vast window looking out at the city below. The storm had passed. So what now? Elara asked softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. Now we build something real, Julian said, wrapping his arm around her. No more cages, no more shadows, just us. We can go to a gala at the Met, or we can get pizza in Brooklyn. As long as we're together, that's all that matters. She looked up at him, her heart full. She hadn't just found love in the arms of a stranger. She had found her own strength. She hadn't been rescued by a billionaire. She had stood beside him as an equal, and together they had faced the world and won. And so Elara and Julian's story wasn't a fairy tale ending, but something far more real and powerful. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes our most desperate moments can lead to our greatest destinies. They learned that trust isn't just about believing in another person. It's about having the courage to believe in yourself, even when the world tries to write a different story for you. Their love, born from a moment of panic and shielded from a world of judgment, became their unbreakable foundation. They didn't just fall for each other, they rose together, proving that the strongest empires aren't built on wealth or power, but on the unshakable bond between two people who choose each other against all odds. If this story of courage, love, and redemption moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a story of triumph, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that will capture your heart. Comment below and let us know what part of their journey resonated with you the most.